The snow was coming down hard when Susan Morrison called me at 5 in the morning demanding I plow the community center parking lot, even though my contract with the Riverside Meadows HOA had expired 3 months ago. I pulled my phone away from my ear as her shrill voice continued ranting about community standards and my obligations. The thing was, I had no obligations anymore. My name is Lucas Yates, and I run a small snow removal business in Boulder, Colorado. I had been servicing the Riverside Meadows HOA for the past 4 years, and every single one of those years had been a nightmare of late payments, constant complaints, and unreasonable demands. "Susan, my contract ended in September," I said, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "We agreed that I would no longer be providing services to the HOA. That's ridiculous. You've always done our snow removal. You can't just abandon the community like this." "I didn't abandon anyone. You chose not to renew the contract when I asked for a modest rate increase to cover my rising costs." The memory of that September board meeting was still fresh in my mind. I had asked for a 15% increase, which would have brought my monthly retainer from $2,000 to $2,300. My fuel costs had gone up, my insurance had increased, and I needed to hire another driver to keep up with demand across all my contracts. The HOA board, led by Susan Morrison, had laughed at my proposal and said they could find someone cheaper. "I don't care about contracts or paperwork," Susan snapped. "We have a snowstorm, and that parking lot needs to be cleared before the community center opens at 9 for the senior breakfast." "Get over here now." "No." The single word hung in the cold morning air. I could hear Susan's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "What did you just say to me?" I said. "No. I don't work for the HOA anymore. You'll need to contact whoever you hired to replace me." "We haven't found anyone yet. All the other companies want too much money, and nobody wants to start a contract in the middle of winter. You're being incredibly selfish and unprofessional." I sat up in bed and looked out my window. The snow was really coming down now. We were probably looking at 8 to 10 inches by the time this storm passed, maybe more. It was the first major snowfall of the season, right before Thanksgiving, and I knew my phone would be ringing off the hook all day from my actual clients. "Susan, I'm sorry you're in this situation, but it's not my problem. You had 3 months to find a replacement and chose not to. That's on you and the board. The board will hear about this. We'll make sure every HOA in Boulder County knows how unreliable you are. You do that." "Have a good morning, Susan." I hung up before she could respond. My wife, Jennifer, rolled over in bed and looked at me with sleepy eyes. "Let me guess. Susan Morrison. How'd you know?" "Because you have that particular look of exhausted frustration that only she can create." "What did she want?" "She wants me to plow the community center lot even though they didn't renew the contract." Jennifer sat up and laughed. "You're kidding. After all the grief they gave you. After Susan told the entire board meeting that you were trying to gouge them and that snow removal was a simple job that anyone could do, the very same. Please tell me you said no." I said no. She kissed me on the cheek. "Good, now come back to bed. It's not even 6 yet." But I couldn't sleep. I got up and made coffee, watching the snow fall in the quiet darkness of our kitchen. I had started my snow removal business 8 years ago with a single truck and plow. Now I had 3 trucks, 4 employees, and contracts with 12 different properties around Boulder County. Riverside Meadows HOA had been one of my first major contracts, and for a long time I had put up with their nonsense because I needed the money. But things were different now. I had good clients who paid on time and treated me with respect. I didn't need Susan Morrison and her band of petty tyrants making my life miserable for poverty wages. My phone rang again at 6:30. It was Susan again. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. I declined the call. She called a third time and I finally answered. "What, Susan? I want to discuss terms for you to plow our parking lots today. I'm listening. We'll pay you your old rate for today's service. $200 for the community center lot." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "Susan, my emergency rate for a property that size in a storm like this is $800. That's for properties I don't have a contract with. $800. That's highway robbery. That's the market rate for emergency snow removal. You wanted to play hardball with the contract renewal, so now you get to experience what it costs to get last-minute service. We'll pay $300, $800, or you can keep calling around to other companies. But I can tell you right now, anyone you find is going to charge you at least that much, probably more." There was a long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background. Susan must have been at an emergency board meeting. "Fine, $800, but you need to be here by 8. "I'll be there when I get there. I have actual clients who have contracts and priority. You'll be last on my list." "That's unacceptable. The senior breakfast starts at 9. Then you should have renewed my contract when you had the chance. $800 and I'll get there when I can. Take it or leave it." Another pause, more muffled arguing in the background. "Fine, just get here as soon as possible." I smiled as I hung up. Jennifer had come into the kitchen and was pouring herself coffee. "Did you really just charge them $800? "I really did." "They're going to lose their minds." "They already have." I spent the rest of the morning taking care of my regular clients. The snow kept falling, and by 9 o'clock we had already gotten 6 inches with more on the way. My crew and I worked steadily through our list of priority properties. Shopping centers, medical offices, apartment complexes. All the clients who had signed contracts and paid their retainers on time. I finally pulled into the Riverside Meadows Community Center parking lot at 2 in the afternoon. The snow had stopped, but the lot was a disaster. There must have been 10 inches of heavy, wet snow covering the entire area. I could see tire tracks where people had tried to drive through, creating deep ruts that would freeze solid overnight if they weren't cleared. Susan's car was parked right in front of the entrance, blocking the main walkway. I plowed around her first, making sure to pile extra snow on both sides of her vehicle. Not enough to trap her, just enough to be annoying. I was halfway through the main lot when Susan came storming out of the building. She was wearing a purple puffy jacket and matching snow boots that looked like they'd never actually touched snow before today. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her face was red with anger. She marched up to my truck and started banging on the door. I rolled down the window. "It's about time. Do you have any idea how many people had to cancel plans today because of your negligence?" "My negligence? Susan, I don't work for you. I did you a favor by coming here at all." "A favor? You're charging us $800. That's my rate. If you don't like it, you're welcome to try to find someone else to remove the snow that's already on the ground." Her face got even redder. "This is extortion. I'm going to report you to the Better Business Bureau." "You do that." "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." I rolled up my window and continued plowing. Susan stood there for a moment, fuming, before storming back into the building. I finished the job in about 90 minutes. It was a big lot, and the snow was heavy. When I was done, I took photos of the completed work with my phone, documenting everything for my records. I sent an invoice through email before I even left the parking lot. $800, due upon receipt. I didn't expect them to pay quickly, but at least I had documentation. Susan called me the next day. "We received your invoice. The board wants to discuss renewing your contract." "I'm open to that discussion." We'd like you to come to the next board meeting. It's this Thursday at 7. I can do that. Good, and Lucas. Don't get any ideas about raising your rates. We're prepared to offer you the same deal as before. I almost laughed again. We can discuss it on Thursday. Thursday evening came, and I drove to the community center. The board meeting was held in a small conference room on the second floor. Susan sat at the head of the table with 4 other board members arranged around her. I recognized most of them. David Chen, the treasurer. Patricia Landry, the secretary. Robert Hammond and Deanne Foster, the other 2 board members. "Thank you for coming, Lucas," Susan said in a tone that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "We've discussed your performance over the past 4 years, and while there have been some issues, we're willing to continue our business relationship." "What kind of issues?" I asked. Susan pulled out a manila folder and opened it. "We have documentation of several incidents where snow removal was not completed to our standards. Last January, you left snow piled in front of the handicapped parking spaces. In February, you didn't come out for a small snowfall that we felt warranted attention. In January, I plowed during an active snowstorm and couldn't place the snow in your preferred location because there was nowhere else to put it. I came back the next day and moved it once I could safely do so. In February, we got an inch of snow, which was below the 3-inch threshold specified in our contract. In March, I don't know what you're about to say, but I'm sure I can explain it." Susan's jaw tightened. "The point is, we have concerns about your reliability. And yet here you are, asking me to renew the contract. We're willing to give you another chance," Susan said. "Same terms as before. $2,000 per month, November through March, 3-inch threshold for snow removal. Emergency callouts as needed for ice and other hazards." "No," the word hung in the air just like it had on the phone call during the storm. "Excuse me," Susan said. "No, I'm not accepting those terms." David Chen leaned forward. "What are your terms?" $6,000 per month for a 5-month contract, November through March. That's $30,000 total. 2-inch threshold instead of 3 inches. Emergency callouts for ice included in the base rate, no additional charges. Payment due the 1st of each month, no exceptions." Susan's face went white, then red, then almost purple. $6,000 a month, that's triple what we were paying, that's correct. That's outrageous, that's insane. That's the rate," I said calmly. "You can accept it or decline it, makes no difference to me." Robert Hammond cleared his throat. "Lucas, that seems like a very steep increase. Can you explain the reasoning?" "Sure. My costs have gone up significantly. Fuel, insurance, labor, equipment maintenance. But more importantly, this HOA has been consistently difficult to work with. Late payments, unreasonable complaints, constant interference with how I do my job. The increased rate reflects the hassle factor of dealing with this board." "The hassle factor?" Susan's voice was shaking with rage. "How dare you? You asked for my terms. Those are my terms. Triple the old rate because, frankly, that's what it's worth to me to deal with this HOA. You're welcome to find someone else if you don't like it." Patricia Landry spoke up for the first time. "Have you gotten quotes from other companies?" she asked Susan. Susan shifted in her seat. "We've contacted several companies. They're all quoting rates between $4,000 and $5,000 per month." "So Lucas is only asking for a bit more than market rate," Patricia said. "He's gouging us, taking advantage of the situation." "I'm charging what my time and aggravation are worth," I corrected. "If you don't want to pay it, don't. But I'm not negotiating. $6,000 a month or I walk." David Chen was doing calculations on a calculator. "That's an increase of $48,000 over our old annual contract." $48,000 over what you were paying. But you were getting a sweetheart deal before because I needed the work. I don't need it anymore." The board members looked at each other. Susan was glaring at me like she wanted to throw me out the window. "We need to discuss this privately," Susan finally said. "Please wait outside." I stood up. "Take your time, but I need an answer tonight. If you decline, I have another property that wants to sign a contract and I won't have capacity for this one." That was a bluff, but they didn't know that. I waited in the hallway for 20 minutes. I could hear raised voices through the door. Susan was clearly arguing with the other board members. Finally, the door opened and Patricia waved me back in. "We've discussed your proposal," Susan said stiffly. "And we've decided we need more time to consider it. We'll have an answer for you by next week." "No," I said. "No, I need an answer tonight. Right now, actually." "That's completely unreasonable. We need time to review our budget, get other quotes, discuss alternatives. You've had 3 months to do all of that. You're out of time. Yes or no right now?" The room fell silent. Susan looked like she might explode. The other board members were looking at each other nervously. "Can you give us 5 more minutes?" David Chen asked. "5 minutes, I'll be in the hallway." I stepped out again. This time I only waited 3 minutes before the door opened. "Fine," Susan said. Her face looked like she had just swallowed poison. "We accept your terms. $6,000 per month for 5 months. But we want everything in writing and we want strict performance standards. I'll have my lawyer draw up a contract. You'll have it by Monday. And Susan, the contract will include a clause that states if payment is late by more than 5 business days, the contract is void and you'll owe the full balance of the remaining months. It will also state that I have final say on when plowing is necessary and the board cannot interfere with my work or my methods." "Fine," she spat. "Is there anything else you want to extort from us?" "Just prompt payment and basic respect. See you Monday." I left the building feeling better than I had in months. Jennifer laughed for a solid 5 minutes when I told her what happened. $6,000 a month, Lucas, you're a genius. They had it coming. And honestly, I almost hope they decline the contract when they see it in writing. I really don't want to deal with Susan Morrison for another winter. But the following Monday, I received a signed contract and a check for $6,000 via certified mail. Susan had signed her name so hard the pen had nearly torn through the paper. The first real snow of the contract period came in early December. I was out at the community center at 4 in the morning, plowing the lot before most of the residents were even awake. I took photos, sent them to the board email with a timestamp, and moved on to my next property. Susan called me at 7. "Did you plow this morning?" "Yes, at 4. Check your email." "I didn't authorize you to plow. We only got 2 inches. The contract says 2-inch threshold and I determine when plowing is necessary. We got 2.5 inches. I plowed." "That's what you're paying for." "But nobody was even awake. You didn't need to come that early. Would you prefer I come at 9 when people are trying to park, when the snow has been compressed by tires and turned to ice?" She didn't have an answer for that. She hung up. 2 weeks later, we got another storm. This time it was a monster. 14 inches overnight with drifting that made some areas of the parking lot impassable. I was there at 3 in the morning with 2 trucks, working for 6 hours straight to keep ahead of the snow. Susan came out around 8, bringing me a cup of coffee. I almost fell off my truck in shock. "Thank you for being here," she said stiffly. "I know this is a bad storm. Just doing my job." She stood there awkwardly for a moment, then went back inside without another word. The holidays came and went without incident. I plowed when needed, sent my invoices, and received payment on time. Susan still called to complain occasionally, but there was less venom in her voice. Maybe she was finally realizing that good service costs money. Then came January. I received my monthly check on January 1st as scheduled, but on January 15th the check bounced. I called David Chen immediately. "David, my January payment bounced." "What? That's impossible. I signed that check myself." "Well, my bank disagrees. I need a new check, plus the $35 fee my bank charged me for the return check." "Let me look into this. I'll call you back." He called back an hour later. "Lucas, I'm so sorry. There was a bank error. We had plenty of money in the account. I'm getting a new check issued today, and I'll personally drive it to your office this afternoon." "What happened?" "Honestly, I don't know. The bank is investigating, but you'll have your money today, I promise." David was as good as his word. He showed up at my office at 3 with a new check and an additional check for the bank fee, plus an extra $100 for the inconvenience. "The board voted to give you this," he said, handing me the extra check. "We really appreciate your reliability this winter, and we're sorry about the payment issue." "Was Susan at that vote?" David smiled slightly. "Susan was outvoted 4-1. I cashed both checks immediately, and they cleared without issue. February was brutal. We had 3 major storms in 2 weeks, and I practically lived in my truck. The Riverside Meadows lot was plowed and salted so many times that I started to see it in my dreams. But I showed up every time, and the lot was always clear when residents needed it." On February 20th, I received a letter from the HOA. I opened it expecting another complaint or bizarre request. Instead, it was a letter signed by David Chen, Patricia Landry, Robert Hammond, and Deanne Foster. "Dear Lucas, we wanted to take a moment to express our appreciation for your exceptional service this winter. Your prompt response times, professional attitude, and quality work have been outstanding. We recognize that our previous arrangement did not adequately compensate you for your services, and we're grateful you were willing to work with us to establish a fair contract. We look forward to continuing our business relationship. Please consider this letter a notice of our intent to renew the contract for next winter at the same rates and terms. Sincerely, the Riverside Meadows HOA Board." Susan's signature was noticeably absent. I showed the letter to Jennifer that evening. Only 4 signatures. "Susan's not going down without a fight," Jennifer observed. "I bet she's furious that the other board members are happy with you." She was right. Susan called me 3 days later. "I hear you've been talking to the other board members behind my back." "I haven't talked to anyone except David Chen, and that was about the bounce check. If other board members want to send me letters, that's their choice. That letter was sent without my approval. I'm the president of this board, and all official correspondence should go through me." "Take it up with your board, Susan. I just cash the checks and plow the snow. You think you're very clever, don't you? Coming in here with your inflated rates, your demands, your attitude. You're taking advantage of this community." "Susan, real talk. I'm charging you less than you'd pay anyone else for the same level of service. The other board members know it. The residents know it. The only person who doesn't seem to understand it is you. How dare you speak to me like that? You called me. If you don't like what I have to say, hang up. But stop wasting my time with these complaints. I've done everything the contract requires and then some. You're just angry because I didn't let you push me around." She hung up without another word. The next day, I got a call from David Chen. "Lucas, we need to talk. Can you come to an emergency board meeting tonight?" My heart sank. "What's this about?" "Just come." 7 o'clock. I arrived at the community center that evening with a sense of dread. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. I walked into the conference room to find the 4 board members seated on one side of the table. Susan's chair was empty. "Where's Susan?" I asked. Patricia Landry gestured for me to sit. "That's what we need to talk to you about." Susan has been removed as board president. I sat down slowly. What happened? David Chen opened a folder. We've been investigating some financial irregularities. It turns out Susan has been writing checks from the HOA account without board approval. Small amounts at first, but it's been going on for months. How much are we talking about? About $15,000 over the past year. I let out a low whistle. What was she spending it on? Personal expenses, mostly. Restaurant bills, shopping trips, even a weekend vacation. She was disguising them as community expenses. A restaurant charge would be labeled as a board meeting. Shopping would be listed as community supplies. How did you catch her? Robert Hammond spoke up. The bounce check on your January payment was the first red flag. David investigated and found that Susan had written herself a check for $4,000 2 days before your payment was due. She labeled it as an emergency building repair, but no repair was ever done. She stole money that was supposed to pay me. And she would have gotten away with it if our reserve account hadn't been lower than expected, David said. Once we started digging, we found a pattern going back months. What happens now? Patricia leaned forward. We've reported her to the police. They're treating it as embezzlement. We've also filed a civil lawsuit to recover the money. She's been removed from the board effective immediately. Does she know? We sent her a registered letter today. We also changed all the locks and removed her access to the HOA bank accounts. I sat back in my chair, processing all of this. Susan Morrison, the woman who had spent months telling me I was gouging the HOA, had been stealing from them the entire time. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because we want you to know that the board appreciates your professionalism, David said, and because we wanted to apologize. Susan has been making your life difficult for years, and we should have reined her in sooner. We also wanted to make sure you'll still work with us next winter, Patricia added. We know Susan gave you a hard time, but she's gone now. We'd like to have a better relationship going forward. At the same rate, David confirmed. It's fair and we know it. We were just too cheap to admit it before. I thought about it for a moment. Without Susan in the picture, working with the Riverside Meadows HOA might actually be pleasant. The other board members seemed reasonable enough. All right, I said. I'll plan on renewing for next season, but I want the contract signed by August, not September. And I want payment terms of 5 days from invoice, not 30. That's more than fair, David said. We'll have everything drawn up by July. We shook hands, and I left the meeting feeling like a weight had been lifted. Susan Morrison was finally getting what she deserved. The rest of February and all of March passed without incident. I plowed when needed, sent my invoices, and got paid promptly. The new board president, Robert Hammond, was friendly and professional. We communicated by email mostly, and it was always brief and to the point. On April 1st, the last day of my contract, I sent my final invoice. The check arrived on April 3rd with a thank you note from the board. 2 weeks later, I saw a news article in the Boulder Daily Camera. Former HOA president charged with embezzlement. The article detailed Susan Morrison's arrest and the charges against her. She was facing up to 6 years in prison and full restitution of the stolen funds. I called David Chen. I saw the news. Yeah, it's been quite a saga. The investigation found even more money than we initially thought. Total was over $20,000. Is the HOA going to recover it? Most of it. Susan's house is going into foreclosure and the court ordered the proceeds to go toward restitution. We'll probably get back about $15,000. It's not everything, but it's something. What about the criminal case? Her trial is in June. The prosecutor seems confident they have a solid case. Between the bank records, the fake receipts, and the testimony from board members, she doesn't have much of a defense. Keep me posted. Will do, and Lucas, thanks for standing up to her. I think you were the first person in years who didn't let her push them around. It made the rest of us realize we didn't have to either. June came, and I followed the trial in the newspaper. It lasted 3 days. Susan Morrison was found guilty on 4 counts of embezzlement and 2 counts of fraud. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered full restitution plus fees and court costs. I didn't feel happy about it exactly. Prison is a harsh thing, even for someone like Susan. But I felt a sense of justice. She had spent years making people miserable, treating service providers like garbage and stealing from her own community. Now she was facing the consequences. Jennifer and I were having dinner when I told her about the sentencing. 4 years seems harsh, she said. Maybe. But she stole $20,000 and showed no remorse during the trial. According to the article, she actually told the judge that she deserved the money for all her hard work managing the HOA. She really doesn't get it, does she? Some people never do. August came around, and true to their word, the Riverside Meadows HOA sent me a new contract. Same terms, same rate, payment within 5 days. I signed it and sent it back the same day. When winter arrived again, I was ready. The first snow came in November, and I was at the community center at dawn, plowing clean paths through the fresh powder. My phone didn't ring with complaints. My emails were full of thank you notes instead of nitpicking criticism. The checks arrived on time, every time. In December, the board invited me to their holiday party. I almost declined, still wary after years of dealing with Susan. But Jennifer convinced me to go, and I was glad I did. The residents were friendly, the food was good, and multiple people thanked me for my service. Robert Hammond pulled me aside during the party. Lucas, I wanted you to know that the community center is going to have a plaque installed next month. It's going to list all the service providers who keep this place running. Your company will be on it. That's not necessary, I said. It is to us. We took people like you for granted for too long. That's changing. As we drove home that night, Jennifer reached over and squeezed my hand. See, standing up for yourself works out sometimes. Sometimes, I agreed, but it was a close thing. If they'd decided to find someone else after I tripled my rate, I would have been out a decent chunk of income. But you knew they couldn't. You knew you were giving them a fair price for good work, even at triple the old rate. I knew the market rate. I just bet that they'd rather pay it to someone they knew than gamble on someone new. And you bet that at least some of the board members were reasonable people who were tired of Susan's nonsense. That too. The years that followed were smooth. I renewed the contract every August without drama. The HOA paid on time, treated me with respect, and stayed out of my way while I worked. My business continued to grow, and I hired 2 more employees to keep up with demand. I still thought about Susan sometimes. About that first phone call during the snowstorm when she demanded I plow their lot for free. About her face when I told her my new rate. About how her own greed and need for control had brought her down in the end. There was a lesson in there somewhere about respecting the people who do the work that keeps your community running. About paying fair prices for good service. About how cutting corners and treating people poorly will eventually catch up with you. But mostly, I just felt grateful. Grateful that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered. Grateful that I'd bet on my own worth and won. Grateful that sometimes, just sometimes, the person who refuses to be pushed around comes out on top. Winter came and went, seasons changed, snow fell and melted. My trucks kept running, my plows kept clearing paths, and my business kept growing. The Riverside Meadows HOA became one of my favorite clients, proof that good working relationships are possible when both sides act with respect and fairness. And somewhere in a minimum security facility in Colorado, Susan Morrison had 4 years to think about where her attitude had gotten her. I hoped she learned something from it, but I wasn't holding my breath. Some people never change, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I had snow to plow, a business to run, and a life to live. And for the first time in years, none of it involved dealing with unreasonable HOA presidents who thought they could push me around. I pulled into the Riverside Meadows parking lot early one February morning as the sun was just starting to rise over the mountains. The lot was covered in fresh snow, clean and white and waiting for my plow. I dropped the blade, engaged the hydraulics, and got to work. This was my job. This was what I was good at, and I was getting paid exactly what I was worth. Life was good. The years continued on, and I kept my relationship with the Riverside Meadows HOA strong. Each August, the contract renewal came like clockwork. Each winter, I plowed their lots with the same dedication I gave all my clients. And each spring, when the last snow melted and the contract period ended, both sides felt good about the arrangement. In the 3rd year after Susan's conviction, David Chen called me with some news. "Lucas, I thought you'd want to know. Susan was released from prison last week. Good behavior got her out 6 months early. Is she moving back to the area?" "No. Her husband divorced her while she was inside, sold their house, moved to Arizona. She doesn't have anything to come back to." "Where's she going?" "I heard through the grapevine that she's moving to New Mexico to live with her sister. Starting over, I guess." I felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. "Well, I hope she figured some things out." "You're more charitable than I am," David said. "She made a lot of people miserable over the years." "Yeah, but prison is no joke. 4 years is a long time to lose. She stole $20,000. I know. I'm not saying she didn't earn the consequences. I'm just saying I hope she's different now." After we hung up, I mentioned the conversation to Jennifer. "You really hope she changed?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe. I hope prison taught her something beyond just how to avoid getting caught next time. You're a better person than me." "I'm still mad at her for all those 5 a.m. phone calls." I laughed. "Those were pretty terrible, but they led to me tripling my rate, so I can't complain too much." Fair point. Years passed. My business celebrated its 15th anniversary. I hired my 10th employee. I bought a 4th truck and upgraded all my equipment. The Riverside Meadows HOA remained a steady client, never late on payments, never unreasonable with demands. In the 6th year after Susan's arrest, I was plowing the community center lot during a particularly bad March storm when I saw someone standing near the building entrance. It was early, barely dawn, and I couldn't figure out why anyone would be out in this weather. As I got closer, I realized it was a woman in a thin coat, no hat, no gloves. She was just standing there in the falling snow watching me work. Something about her posture seemed familiar. I finished my pass and pulled up closer to get a better look. My stomach dropped. It was Susan Morrison. She looked different. Older, thinner, her hair streaked with gray, but it was definitely her. She stood there watching me, making no move to approach or leave. I sat in my truck for a long moment, debating what to do. Finally, I rolled down my window. "Susan." She looked up at me, her eyes hollow. "Hi, Lucas. What are you doing here?" "I'm in town visiting a friend. I was driving past and saw your truck. I just wanted to see the place again." An awkward silence fell between us. "I heard you moved to New Mexico," I said. "I did." "This is just a visit. I'm leaving tomorrow." Another silence. The snow kept falling. I wanted to say something, Susan said quietly. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how I treated you, for all of it. I didn't know what to say to that. Sorry seemed inadequate given everything that had happened. I was so angry back then, she continued. Angry at everything. I felt like I had to control everything, had to fight everyone, had to win every argument. I didn't know how to just let people do their jobs. What changed? Prison changes you. Having nothing changes you. Losing everything you thought mattered changes you. She looked up at the community center. I spent 4 years thinking about all the people I hurt, all the relationships I destroyed because I couldn't let go of being right. Are you doing better now? I'm trying. I work at a grocery store in Albuquerque. I go to therapy. I'm paying back the HOA in installments. It'll take me years, but I'll make it right eventually. That's good. She pulled her thin coat tighter. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that. You were right to stand up to me. You were right to charge what you were worth. I was wrong. I appreciate you saying that. Take care, Lucas, and thank you for what you did. You were the first person who made me realize I couldn't treat people that way anymore, even if I was too stubborn to admit it at the time. She turned and walked back to an old Honda parked in the visitor section. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the falling snow. I sat there for a few minutes, processing the encounter. Then I got back to work. The snow wasn't going to plow itself. That night I told Jennifer about seeing Susan. Wow, she said. How do you feel about it? I don't know. Weird. She seemed genuine, but after everything that happened, it's hard to take an apology at face value. You think she really changed? Maybe. Prison does change people. And losing everything can give you perspective. Are you glad she apologized? I thought about it. Yeah, I think I am. Not because I needed it, but because it seemed like she needed to say it, like it was part of her trying to move forward. That's very mature of you. Or maybe I'm just getting soft in my old age. She laughed and kissed me. You're not old. Tell that to my back after 12 hours on a plow truck. I never saw Susan Morrison again after that morning, but I thought about that encounter from time to time. About how people can change, or at least try to. About how hitting rock bottom sometimes is the only way certain people learn important lessons. The Riverside Meadows HOA continued to thrive. Under new leadership, they became known as one of the better-run communities in Boulder County. Property values increased. Resident satisfaction improved, and service providers actually wanted to work with them, which was a nice change. My business kept growing too. After 20 years in operation, I had 12 employees, 6 trucks, and contracts with 43 properties. I was making more money than I ever dreamed possible back when I started with that single truck and plow. And it all traced back, in a weird way, to that snowy morning when I told Susan Morrison no. When I decided my time and skills were worth more than poverty wages and constant abuse. When I tripled my rate and dared them to walk away. It was a lesson I tried to pass on to my employees. Know your worth. Don't let people take advantage of you. Charge fair prices for good work and don't apologize for it. Some of them struggled with that concept, especially the younger ones. They wanted to make everyone happy, wanted to avoid conflict, wanted to be liked. I understood that impulse, but I also knew where it led. You can be fair and still stand up for yourself, I told them. You can be professional and still demand respect. And you can walk away from clients who make your life miserable, even if it costs you money in the short term. Not all of them listened. Some had to learn the hard way, just like I did. But that's how it goes sometimes. One autumn evening, about 8 years after Susan's arrest, I was closing up the office when David Chen called. Lucas, I have some news. Susan Morrison passed away. I sat down slowly. What happened? Heart attack. She was at work at the grocery store in Albuquerque. Paramedics couldn't revive her. How old was she? 59. Too young, I thought, way too young. Her sister called to let us know, David continued. She also wanted us to know that Susan had been making payments on the restitution. She paid back about 12,000 of the 20 she owed. Her sister is going to cover the rest from Susan's life insurance. That's good of her. Yeah, her sister seemed like a nice woman. Said Susan had really turned her life around in the last few years. Was going to church, volunteering at a food bank, doing her best to make amends. After we hung up, I sat in my dark office for a long time. I thought about Susan Morrison, about her angry phone calls and her petty complaints and her desperate need for control. I thought about her standing in the snow that morning, apologizing. I thought about her working at a grocery store, trying to pay back what she stole, trying to be better. And I thought about how life is complicated, how people can be terrible and then get better, how consequences can teach lessons, even harsh ones, how sometimes redemption is possible, even if it comes too late to fix everything. I went home and told Jennifer about Susan's death. That's sad, she said. I know she put you through hell, but nobody deserves to die that young. No, I agreed, they don't. At least she was trying to make things right at the end. Yeah, at least there was that. Life moved on as it always does. Winters came and went. Snow fell and was plowed. Contracts were signed and fulfilled. My business continued its steady growth. The Riverside Meadows HOA installed that plaque they had promised years ago. My company's name was on it, along with all the other service providers who kept the community running. It was a small thing, but it meant something. I stood looking at that plaque one spring afternoon after the last snow of the season had melted. My name, permanently mounted on the wall of the community center. Recognition for work well done. It had been a long journey from that first angry phone call to this moment. A journey that involved standing up for myself, demanding fair compensation and refusing to be pushed around. A journey that had cost Susan Morrison everything, but had taught both of us important lessons. I hoped, wherever she was, that she had found peace. And I hoped that the changes she made in those last years counted for something, meant something, mattered in the grand scheme of things. But mostly, I was just grateful for my life. For my business, my family, my success. For the ability to look myself in the mirror and know that I treated people fairly and expected fair treatment in return. The sun was setting over the mountains as I drove home that evening. The roads were clear, the air was warming, and another winter had passed. In a few months, I'd be signing contracts for the next season. The cycle would begin again, and somewhere in all of that, in the endless cycle of snow and plowing and renewal, there was meaning. There was purpose. There was the satisfaction of work done well and prices charged fairly and respect given and received. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.